The signal was ancient, faint, broken, and filled with the screams of a dying species. The galaxy had ignored it, afraid of what lay beyond. But humanity listened. And when Deathworlders hear a cry for help, they don't send aid, they send retribution. This is the story of how chaos became a weapon, how Earth's children turned thought into a storm, and how one forgotten fleet answered an alien SOS with pure destruction. The Silent Scream. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood before the massive viewing screen of the exploration vessel Prometheus Dawn, watching stars drift past like scattered diamonds against black velvet. Her calloused hands gripped the railing as she studied the mission reports floating on her personal display. 50 years had passed since humanity first stepped beyond Earth's solar system, and they were still the newest members of the Galactic Council. Most alien species treated humans like curious children who had just learned to walk among the stars. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency around her. Lieutenant Commander James Park monitored the navigation systems while Dr. Sarah Chen worked at her xenobiology station, cataloging new species they had discovered during their current survey mission. Chief Engineer Maria Santos appeared on a side screen from the engine room, reporting normal power levels across all systems. The Prometheus Dawn was humanity's most advanced exploration vessel, built specifically for long-range missions into uncharted space. Elena had earned her position through 20 years of service in Earth's Space Navy, working her way up from a shuttle pilot to commanding officer of humanity's flagship explorer. Her crew respected her not just for her tactical skills, but for her ability to make impossible decisions under pressure. The other species in the galaxy might consider humans too young and reckless for serious exploration work, but Elena had proven them wrong on dozens of missions. Dr. Chen suddenly looked up from her station with excitement in her eyes. She had been monitoring long-range communication frequencies, searching for signs of intelligent life in the sectors they were exploring. Her xenolinguistics background made her the perfect person to identify alien transmissions and attempt first contact protocols. Now her equipment was showing readings that made her check the calibration twice before speaking. "Captain, I'm detecting something unusual," Dr. Chen announced, her voice cutting through the bridge's ambient noise. "There's a transmission coming from the Kepler 442 system, approximately 47 light-years from our current position. The signal is incredibly old, maybe transmitted centuries ago, but it's definitely artificial in origin." Elena walked over to Chen's station and studied the scrolling data on her screens. The waveform patterns were unlike anything in their database of known alien communications. The signal showed complex mathematical structures and what appeared to be visual imagery encoded in the transmission. Most intriguingly, the signal seemed to be repeating in a loop, suggesting it was some kind of automated distress beacon. "What kind of imagery are we looking at?" Elena asked as Chen worked to decode the visual components of the message. Dr. Chen's fingers flew over her interface as she ran the signal through various translation algorithms. Slowly, shapes began forming on her screen. The images showed what appeared to be a crystalline cityscape with flowing organic architecture that seemed to grow rather than be constructed. Beautiful spires reached toward purple skies while streams of light flowed between the structures like rivers of pure energy. But as the message continued, the images changed dramatically. The same crystal cities appeared again, but now they were dark and lifeless. The flowing energy streams had stopped, and the organic architecture looked brittle and dead. Strange shadow-like entities moved through the empty streets, consuming what little light remained. The final images showed masses of the crystalline beings fleeing their homeworld as their entire civilization crumbled around them. "It's a distress call," Dr. Chen said quietly. "An entire species crying out for help as something destroyed their world. The mathematical components indicate this signal has been broadcasting for over 400 years. Elena studied the haunting images of a dying civilization. The crystalline beings appeared peaceful and advanced, with technology that seemed to blend perfectly with natural forces. Whatever had destroyed them was thorough and merciless, leaving nothing but empty husks where once great cities had thrived. The thought of an entire species crying out desperately for help while the galaxy ignored their pleas made Elena's chest tighten with determination. Lieutenant Commander Park looked up from his navigation console with concern evident in his expression. As the ship's tactical officer, he was responsible for assessing potential threats and mission risks. The Kepler 442 system was in a region of space that the Galactic Council had classified as off-limits to most species due to unexplained energy phenomena and reports of missing ships. "Captain, I need to remind you that the Kepler 442 system is restricted by Galactic Council regulations," Park said carefully. "They've issued warnings about unauthorized exploration in that sector. Several Council survey teams have gone missing there over the past 2 centuries." Elena knew Park was right to be cautious. Humanity's membership in the Galactic Council was still new and somewhat provisional. Breaking council regulations could result in sanctions against Earth or even expulsion from the interstellar community. But something about the desperate images in that transmission made her unwilling to simply ignore what might be ongoing genocide. Dr. Chen continued analyzing the signal while Elena weighed their options. The xenobiologist had discovered additional layers of data hidden within the transmission, including what appeared to be stellar coordinates and technical specifications for the crystalline being's technology. Most disturbing were the energy readings embedded in the message, showing massive power signatures that defied understanding. "Captain, there's something else," Dr. Chen said as she isolated another portion of the transmission. "The signal contains biological data about the species that sent it. They call themselves the Ethereals, and they're unlike any life form we've encountered. They exist as a hybrid of organic matter and pure energy, which explains their crystal-based architecture and light stream transportation systems." Elena watched as Chen displayed three-dimensional models of the ethereal beings. They appeared as graceful humanoid figures made of living crystal, with energy flowing through their transparent bodies like veins of light. Their faces were delicate and expressive, showing intelligence and emotions that seemed remarkably similar to human expressions. These were clearly sentient beings with rich cultures and complex societies. Chief Engineer Santos contacted them from the engine room, where she had been monitoring the transmission's technical specifications. Her engineering background allowed her to understand the advanced technology described in the ethereal message. What she found made her voice tense with worry when she spoke to the bridge crew. "Captain, I've been analyzing the technical data in this transmission," Santos reported. "The Ethereals were incredibly advanced, with energy manipulation capabilities far beyond anything we've seen, but whatever attacked them was able to completely overwhelm their defenses. The power readings suggest something that could drain entire star systems of energy." Elena felt a chill run down her spine as she considered the implications. If something could destroy a species as advanced as the Ethereals, what chance would humanity have against such a threat? But she also realized that 400 years had passed since the transmission was sent. Perhaps the immediate danger had passed, or maybe there were survivors who still needed help. The bridge fell silent as Elena made her decision. She had joined Earth's Space Navy to explore the unknown and help those in need. The fact that the Galactic Council had restricted the Kepler 442 system only made her more determined to investigate. Sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking rules that prevented people from helping others. "Set course for the Kepler 442 system," Elena commanded. "Maximum speed." Lieutenant Commander Park looked surprised by her decision. "Captain, are you sure about this? We'll be in direct violation of Council regulations." Elena turned to face her bridge crew, seeing the mix of concern and determination in their faces. These people had followed her on dozens of dangerous missions, trusting her judgment even when the odds seemed impossible. She had never led them into a situation without carefully considering the risks and benefits. "Sometimes regulations exist to protect political interests rather than lives," Elena said firmly. "If there's even a chance that some of these ethereals are still alive and need help, we have a moral obligation to investigate. We can deal with council politics later." Dr. Chen looked up from her station with excitement and worry warring in her expression. "Captain, I should mention that the transmission includes warnings about the entities that destroyed their civilization. The ethereals call them the Harvest and describe them as ancient energy beings that consume life force itself. They're supposedly drawn to areas with high concentrations of conscious minds." Elena absorbed this information while watching the stars shift on the viewing screen as their ship changed course toward the Kepler 442 system. The name, the Harvest, sent chills through her, suggesting something that collected and consumed intelligent life like farmers gathering crops. If such entities still existed in that system, the Prometheus Dawn might be flying directly into a trap. Chief Engineer Santos provided an update on their engine status as they prepared for the long journey ahead. "Captain, at maximum speed we'll reach the Kepler 442 system in approximately 18 hours. I'm running full diagnostics on all systems to ensure we're ready for whatever we might find there." Elena nodded and turned back to the viewing screen, watching the stars streak past as they entered faster than light travel. In 18 hours, they would arrive at a system where an entire advanced civilization had been destroyed by something called the Harvest. They had no idea what they would find there, but Elena was determined to answer that 400-year-old cry for help. As the Prometheus Dawn raced through space toward the unknown, Elena thought about humanity's place in the galaxy. They were still considered newcomers by most species, too young and inexperienced for truly dangerous missions. But perhaps their youth was actually an advantage. Maybe it took a species that hadn't learned to be cautious to answer desperate calls for help that others had chosen to ignore. The next 18 hours would change everything they thought they knew about the universe and humanity's role in it. When death meets the eternal. The Prometheus Dawn dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and Captain Elena Rodriguez immediately understood why the Galactic Council had restricted this region of space. The viewing screen showed a solar system that looked like a graveyard of worlds. 3 planets that should have been glowing with life and energy hung in space as dark, lifeless spheres. Their surfaces appeared drained of all color, reduced to gray ash that reflected no light from their dying star. Dr. Sarah Chen worked frantically at her sensor station, trying to make sense of the readings her equipment was detecting. The energy signatures throughout the system were unlike anything in their scientific databases. Massive power sources moved between the dead worlds like predators stalking through a hunting ground. Her xenobiology training had prepared her for many strange alien phenomena, but nothing had prepared her for readings that suggested entities existing as pure energy without any physical form. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple energy signatures throughout the system," Dr. Chen reported, her voice tense with concentration. "These readings are enormous, each one equivalent to the power output of a small star, but they're not coming from any ships or structures we can identify. It's as if the energy itself is alive and moving with purpose." Lieutenant Commander James Park studied his tactical displays with growing concern. As the ship's security officer, he was responsible for protecting the crew from any threats they might encounter. The energy readings Dr. Chen was detecting showed power levels that could easily destroy their ship without any visible weapons or technology. His training told him they should retreat immediately, but he also knew Captain Rodriguez was determined to find any surviving ethereals. Elena examined the tactical data while considering their options. The 4th planet in the system still showed signs of energy activity, though much weaker than the massive signatures moving through space around them. If any ethereals had survived the destruction of their civilization, they would most likely be hiding on that world. But reaching it would mean passing through a region of space filled with entities powerful enough to drain entire planets. Chief Engineer Maria Santos contacted the bridge from her station in the engine room. She had been monitoring their ship's power systems since they arrived in the system, and what she discovered made her voice urgent with worry. The strange energy signatures Dr. Chen was detecting seemed to be having an effect on their own technology, drawing power from their systems in ways that shouldn't be possible. "Captain, we have a problem," Santos reported. "Something in this system is draining power from our engines and life support systems. It's subtle, but I can measure a steady decrease in our energy reserves. If this continues, we'll lose main power in approximately 6 hours. Elena felt her heart sink as she realized the true nature of the threat they were facing. The entities that had destroyed the ethereal civilization weren't just energy beings. They were parasites that fed on any form of power they encountered. Their ship was essentially a floating battery that would attract these creatures like moths to a flame. Every moment they remained in the system put her crew in greater danger. Dr. Chen suddenly straightened at her station as new readings appeared on her sensors. A weak signal was broadcasting from the 4th planet, using the same communication frequencies as the original ethereal distress call. The transmission was barely detectable, suggesting that whoever was sending it had very little power remaining. Her translation algorithms began working to decode the message as it slowly resolved into recognizable patterns. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from the 4th planet," Dr. Chen announced with excitement. "It's definitely ethereal in origin, and it's trying to establish communication with us. The signal is incredibly weak, but I can make out what appears to be a warning message." Elena ordered the main screen to display the incoming transmission as Dr. Chen worked to clean up the signal. Slowly, an image formed showing the interior of what appeared to be an underground crystal cavern. The lighting was dim and flickering, powered by what looked like emergency energy cells. In the center of the image stood a figure that matched the ethereal beings from the original distress call. The ethereal appeared as a tall, graceful humanoid made of living crystal that pulsed with faint inner light. Where the beings in the original transmission had glowed brightly with flowing energy, this survivor looked dimmed and weakened. Its crystalline form was partially clouded, and the energy flowing through its body moved slowly like a dying flame. Despite its weakened condition, the being's face showed intelligence and desperate hope. The translation system finally locked onto the ethereal's language patterns, allowing them to understand its words. The being spoke in a musical voice that carried harmonics no human throat could produce, but the meaning came through clearly in their computer's translation. Elena felt a chill as she heard the fear and determination in the alien's voice. "Beings from the metal ship, I am Zephyr of the Crystal Gardens, last speaker for the ethereal collective. the being said through the translation system. You must leave this system immediately. The harvest has awakened from their deep sleep, and they will consume your life energy as they consumed my people. Your presence here has already attracted their attention. Elena stepped forward to address the transmission directly. She activated their own communication array to send a reply back to the survivor. Despite the danger, she was determined to offer help to this being who had somehow survived the destruction of an entire civilization. The fact that Zephyr was warning them away instead of begging for rescue only increased her respect for the ethereal's character. Zephyr, this is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the human exploration vessel Prometheus Dawn, she said clearly. We received your people's distress call and came to offer assistance. We're not leaving without you. Can you tell us how to fight these harvest entities? Zephyr's crystalline features showed surprise at the humans' offer of help. Through the translation system, they could hear the emotion in the ethereal's response. For 400 years, no one had answered their people's desperate call for aid. The fact that these unknown aliens had traveled across the galaxy to help filled Zephyr with wonder and gratitude. You would risk your lives for strangers? Zephyr asked in amazement. The harvest are ancient beyond measure. They are energy beings that exist partially outside normal space and time. They feed on life force and consciousness itself, growing stronger with each mind they consume. My people fought them for 1,000 years before our defenses finally failed. Dr. Chen leaned forward with scientific curiosity despite the danger they were facing. As a xenobiologist, she was fascinated by the concept of energy beings that could consume consciousness. Her training in alien psychology made her wonder if there might be some way to communicate with these entities or find a weakness in their seemingly perfect predatory abilities. Zephyr, how exactly do these harvest entities consume consciousness? Dr. Chen asked. Do they require physical contact or can they drain minds from a distance? Understanding their feeding mechanism might help us find a way to resist them. Zephyr's form flickered as the being accessed ancient memories of the war against the harvest. The crystalline alien's voice took on a tone of deep sadness as it recalled the destruction of its civilization. Through the translation system, the humans could hear the pain of someone who had watched their entire species slowly consumed by an implacable enemy. They extend their essence into the minds of their victims, Zephyr explained. Once contact is established, they drain not just life energy but memories, experiences, and the very spark of consciousness itself. Their victims don't simply die, they cease to have ever existed as thinking beings. We tried everything to stop them: energy shields, psychic barriers, even removing our consciousness from our physical forms. Nothing worked. Lieutenant Commander Park studied his tactical displays as he listened to Zephyr's explanation. As a military officer, he was trained to find weaknesses in any enemy system. The harvest entities sounded nearly invincible, but every predator had some limitation or vulnerability. His experience in combat had taught him that often the most dangerous enemies were defeated not through superior firepower, but by finding unexpected weaknesses. What about chaotic or unpredictable thought patterns? Park asked. Did your people try using random mental noise to confuse their feeding process? Zephyr paused as if considering this concept for the first time. The ethereals were beings of perfect harmony and order, with consciousness that flowed like music through crystalline minds. The idea of deliberately creating mental chaos was foreign to their nature, but they had been desperate enough to try many impossible solutions during their long war. We are beings of harmony and order, Zephyr replied slowly. Our thoughts flow in perfect patterns that resonate with the universe itself. Creating chaos or randomness in our minds would be like asking us to stop being ethereal. We never considered such a possibility. Elena suddenly realized why humanity might be uniquely suited to fight the harvest entities. Humans had evolved on Earth, a world where chaos and unpredictability were necessary for survival. Their minds were naturally chaotic, filled with random thoughts, emotions, and instincts that had developed through millions of years of evolution on a dangerous planet. What the ethereals saw as a weakness might actually be humanity's greatest strength. Chief Engineer Santos provided an update on their ship's condition as the harvest entities continued draining their power systems. Her engineering expertise allowed her to track exactly how the energy parasites were affecting their technology. The reading she was getting suggested that the entities were probing their ship's systems, learning about human technology before making a direct attack. Captain, power drain is accelerating, Santos reported with urgency. We're down to 4 hours of main power, and I'm detecting active scanning of our systems. Something is studying our ship's technology and biological signatures. I think they're preparing to feed. Elena made a decision that would either save them all or doom her crew to the same fate as the ethereal civilization. She activated the ship's intercom system to address every person aboard the Prometheus Dawn. Her crew needed to understand what they were facing and what she was asking them to do. The plan forming in her mind was desperate and untested, but it might be their only chance. All hands, this is the captain, Elena announced over the intercom. We're facing an enemy that feeds on consciousness and life energy, but I believe we have an advantage they've never encountered before. Human minds are naturally chaotic and unpredictable. We're going to use that chaos as a weapon. Dr. Chen looked up from her station with sudden understanding. As a xenobiologist, she immediately grasped the captain's plan. Human consciousness had evolved through constant struggle and adaptation, creating minds that were inherently resistant to pattern-based attacks. The very qualities that made humans seem primitive to other species might be exactly what was needed to fight the harvest. Captain, you're talking about weaponizing our thought patterns, Dr. Chen said with excitement, using our natural mental chaos to disrupt their feeding process. It's brilliant, but also incredibly dangerous. We'll be opening our minds to entities that have consumed entire civilizations. Elena nodded grimly as she watched the energy signatures of the harvest entities growing closer to their ship. They had minutes at most before the creatures would be close enough to begin their feeding process. The plan she was proposing would require every member of her crew to deliberately expose their consciousness to beings that existed to consume minds. But it was their only chance to save themselves and rescue Zephyr. Zephyr, we're going to attempt something your people never tried, Elena said to the ethereal survivor. We're going to fight chaos with chaos. Prepare your emergency systems for evacuation. We're coming to get you. The last speaker of the ethereal collective looked at the humans with wonder and terror. These strange beings were proposing to do something that seemed impossible, using their primitive minds as weapons against entities that had destroyed advanced civilizations. But perhaps that was exactly what the universe needed. Beings too young and reckless to know that some battles couldn't be won. As the harvest entities closed in on the Prometheus Dawn, Elena prepared her crew for the most dangerous gamble in human history. The Deathworld Solution Captain Elena Rodriguez stood in the center of the Prometheus Dawn's bridge as her crew prepared for the most desperate battle in human history. The harvest entities were now close enough that their energy signatures were overwhelming the ship's sensors. Through the viewing screen, she could see space itself beginning to distort as the ancient predators approached their vessel. Reality seemed to bend and twist around the creatures, creating visual effects that hurt to look at directly. Dr. Sarah Chen had worked frantically to modify the ship's communication arrays for their desperate plan. Instead of broadcasting normal radio signals, the arrays would now transmit the raw electrical patterns of human brain activity. Every person aboard the ship would have their consciousness broadcast into space like a weapon made of pure thought. The concept was insane, but it was their only hope against enemies that consumed minds for sustenance. All stations report ready for Project Mindstorm, Dr. Chen announced as she completed the final calibrations on her equipment. The neural transmission arrays are online and synchronized with our biomonitoring systems. Every crew member's brainwave patterns will be amplified and broadcast simultaneously. Elena activated the ship's intercom to address her crew one final time before they attempted something that had never been tried in the history of spacefaring civilization. 43 human beings were about to use their minds as weapons against entities that had destroyed species far more advanced than humanity. The odds were impossible, but Elena had learned that humans specialized in winning impossible battles. All hands, this is your captain, Elena said, her voice carrying to every corner of the ship. In a few minutes, we're going to do something that no species has ever attempted. We're going to fight with our thoughts, using the chaos in our minds as ammunition. Remember what makes us human: our stubbornness, our refusal to give up, our ability to find hope in the darkest situations. Lieutenant Commander James Park monitored the approaching harvest entities from his tactical station. The energy beings were unlike any enemy he had studied in his military training. They didn't use ships or weapons in any conventional sense, existing instead as living storms of force that could reshape matter and energy at will. 3 of the creatures were now close enough to begin their feeding process, extending tendrils of power toward the human vessel. The first contact between human consciousness and the harvest came when the lead entity attempted to probe the minds aboard the Prometheus Dawn. Elena felt something cold and alien touch the edges of her thoughts, seeking to map the patterns of her consciousness before beginning the consumption process. But instead of the ordered, harmonious thoughts the creature expected, it encountered a mind shaped by evolution on Earth's chaotic surface. Throughout the ship, other crew members were experiencing similar encounters as the harvest entities tried to establish feeding connections. Chief Engineer Maria Santos found her mind flooded with technical specifications, maintenance schedules, and memories of repairing equipment under pressure. Her consciousness was a practical maze of problem-solving instincts that defied any attempt at pattern recognition. Dr. Chen experienced the mental contact as a fascinating scientific phenomenon, even as she fought against it. Her mind raced through hypotheses about the entity's biology, memories of alien species she had studied, and excitement about the implications of weaponized consciousness. The harvest creature trying to feed on her thoughts found itself overwhelmed by the sheer randomness of human curiosity. Mindstorm arrays are online, Dr. Chen reported as their modified communication systems began broadcasting human brainwave patterns into space. Neural chaos levels are reaching maximum amplitude. The harvest entities are showing signs of distress. Elena watched through the viewing screen as the three harvest entities began exhibiting behavior unlike anything Zephyr had described. Instead of smoothly draining their victim's consciousness, the creatures were writhing and pulsing erratically. Their perfect energy forms were being disrupted by contact with minds that operated on principles of chaos rather than order. Zephyr's voice crackled through the communication system from the planet below, filled with wonder and disbelief. The ethereal survivor was monitoring the battle through its people's ancient sensor networks, watching something that should have been impossible. The harvest entities that had consumed an entire galactic civilization were being driven back by the chaotic thoughts of 43 primitive Deathworlders. Impossible, Zephyr whispered through the translation system. The harvest entities are retreating. In 1,000 years of war, we never saw them show any sign of distress or confusion. How are your minds affecting them so dramatically? Elena felt a surge of pride in her species as she realized their desperate plan was actually working. Humanity's greatest weakness, according to other galactic species, was actually their greatest strength. The chaos and unpredictability that made humans seem primitive to advanced civilizations was exactly what was needed to fight enemies that fed on ordered consciousness. Because we're from a death world, Elena replied to Zephyr with grim satisfaction. Our minds evolved to survive constant chaos and danger. We think in ways that don't make sense to creatures that have only known order and stability. The largest harvest entity suddenly changed tactics, abandoning its attempt to feed on individual human minds and instead trying to drain the ship's power systems directly. But Chief Engineer Santos was ready for this approach. She had spent years maintaining equipment under the worst possible conditions, developing an intuitive understanding of how energy flowed through complex systems. They're trying to drain our engines, Santos reported from the engineering section. But I'm rerouting power through backup systems faster than they can track. Human engineering isn't elegant or efficient, but it's unpredictable enough to confuse their feeding process. Dr. Chen made a discovery that changed their understanding of the entire conflict. Her sensors detected that the harvest entities were not just being disrupted by human consciousness, they were actually being damaged by it. The chaotic patterns of human thought were like a virus infecting their ordered energy structures, causing permanent degradation in their ability to maintain coherence. Captain, the neural chaos isn't just driving them away, Dr. Chen announced with excitement. It's actually damaging their fundamental structure. Human consciousness is toxic to their existence. We're not just fighting them, we're poisoning them simply by thinking in their presence. Elena realized they had stumbled upon something that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. If human consciousness was inherently toxic to energy-based predators like the harvest, then humanity could serve as protectors for species that couldn't defend themselves against such threats. Their evolutionary heritage as Deathworlders had given them a unique weapon that no other known species possessed. The three harvest entities began withdrawing from the Prometheus dawn, their energy forms visibly weakened by exposure to human consciousness. But Elena knew this was only a temporary victory. Thousands more of these creatures existed throughout the galaxy, and they would eventually adapt to the threat that humanity represented. They needed to rescue Zephyr and develop a long-term strategy. All hands, prepare for emergency planetary landing, Elena commanded. We're going down to the fourth planet to extract our new friend. Santos, give me everything the engines have. We need to reach the surface before those things recover. The Prometheus Dawn dove toward the fourth planet at maximum speed, racing against time as the weakened harvest entities slowly began to regroup. The ship's heat shields glowed white-hot as they plunged through the thin atmosphere toward the coordinates Zephyr had provided. Through the viewing screen, Elena could see a landscape of crystal formations that had once been beautiful cities but now stood dark and lifeless. Zephyr waited for them in a cavern beneath the planet's surface, surrounded by the last functioning technology of the ethereal civilization. The ancient being moved slowly toward their landing site, its crystalline form still weak from centuries of hiding from the harvest. But there was hope in its movements now, the first hope it had felt since the destruction began. "Human friends," Zephyr said as it was brought aboard their ship, "you have achieved something my people thought impossible. You have wounded entities that seemed invincible, but they will adapt and return with greater numbers. What will you do then?" Elena looked at her crew, seeing the same determination in their faces that had driven humans to explore beyond their dangerous homeworld. They had discovered something incredible about their species, a unique ability that no other known civilization possessed. With that knowledge came responsibility to use it wisely. "We're going to do what humans do best," Elena replied with a smile. "We're going to find the biggest, most impossible problem in the galaxy and solve it through pure stubbornness. The harvest won't expect us to keep fighting because logical species know when they're outmatched." Dr. Chen was already working on plans to study the harvest entities and develop better weapons based on human consciousness. Her scientific mind was excited by the possibilities of weaponizing chaos theory and applying it to galactic defense. The discovery that human thought patterns could damage energy-based life forms opened entirely new fields of research. Chief Engineer Santos began designing modifications to their ship that would allow them to broadcast neural chaos more effectively. She envisioned a fleet of human vessels that could protect vulnerable species from threats they couldn't fight themselves. Humanity could become the galaxy's immune system, fighting diseases that consumed consciousness and life. 3 months later, Elena stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned vessel Deathworld Guardian, flagship of humanity's first interstellar defense fleet. The ship was surrounded by a dozen other human vessels, all equipped with neural broadcast arrays and crewed by volunteers from Earth's most chaotic minds. Beside her, Zephyr served as their guide to species that needed protection from energy-based predators. The Galactic Council had initially been horrified by humanity's violation of the Kepler 442 restrictions, but their attitude changed quickly when they learned what humans had accomplished. 3 Council member species had reported attacks by entities similar to the Harvest, and conventional defenses had proven useless. Now they were begging humanity to provide protection. "Captain, we're receiving a distress call from the Altair system," Lieutenant Commander Park reported from his station. "Unknown energy entities are attacking the Serenity Collective's homeworld. The Council is requesting immediate assistance from the Deathworld Defense Pact." Elena smiled as she gave the order that would become famous throughout the galaxy. Humanity had found their place among the stars not as conquerors or explorers, but as protectors of those who couldn't protect themselves. Their chaotic, dangerous heritage had become a gift they could share with peaceful species who faced impossible threats. "All ships, prepare for faster-than-light jump," Elena commanded. "The Deathworlders are going to solve another impossible problem." As the human fleet leaped through space toward their next battle, Elena reflected on how much had changed since they received that ancient ethereal distress call. Humanity was no longer the newest and least important member of the Galactic Council. They had become something far more valuable, the species that answered desperate calls for help, no matter how impossible the odds. The galaxy was vast and filled with dangers that seemed invincible, but it also contained humans who were too stubborn to accept defeat. And sometimes, that was exactly what the universe needed.